The Captive and the Fugitive by Marcel Proust, volumes 5 and 6 of In Search of Lost Time. I am almost there, y'all. I'm coming down the home stretch. The end is in sight. But in my review of the last volume of In Search of Lost Time, Sodom and Gomorrah, I mentioned, I believe, that that was the last one that Proust got out during his lifetime. That these last books were posthumously published. And I remember wondering if there was going to be any kind of noticeable difference. And there is. There definitely is. But also, what I want to say about The Captive and the Fugitive is that this book takes it to new heights in terms of tedium. You know, what makes In Search of Lost Time such a test of endurance is the fact that it is so incredibly uneventful. And like I said, this book takes it to a new level. Barely anything happens in these two books, because they're technically two. Nothing happens pretty much in the first book. A little bit happens in the second one, but I'll tell you all about it. So yeah, where do we pick up in The Captive and the Fugitive? Well, Albertine has now come to live with the narrator in his home in Paris. And by the way, we finally learn the name of the narrator, and his name is Marcel. So I think the autobiographical elements to this are pretty at the fore, I would say, considering that I guess there's just barely any distinction at this point between the author and the narrator. But we now know his identity, or at least his Christian name, Marcel. So there's that. But anyway, so Albertine is now shacking up with the narrator in Paris, but his jealousy is at this point just completely out of control, and he is essentially keeping her, as the title would indicate, a prisoner in his home, because he is so paranoid that if she goes out by herself, that she will just go have sex with other women, because he still is convinced that she is secretly a lesbian, and he thinks she's just going to go screw like rabbits with whatever girls she meets. So he keeps her basically under a microscope, it seems like. And this is not representative of a healthy relationship, y'all. He is so controlling and so domineering and so petty. But beyond that, like, dude, if you can't trust her any better than that, she ain't worth it anyway. I mean, you're just wasting both of your, just wasting time for both of y'all. But anyway, so that's it. That is literally it, pretty much, for The Captive. It's kind of mounting tension between the narrator and Albertine as she grows frustrated with her captivity, and he is just kind of lost in his own jealous paranoia. But then at the end of the book, Albertine apparently finally has enough, and she flies the coop, and she's like, "Deuces, I'm out." And then the narrator is like, "Oh my goodness," it's like that Cinderella song, "Don't know what you've got till it's gone." And so now he's like, "I have to get Albertine back." But then at the end of the book, he gets a letter informing him that Albertine was tragically killed in an equestrian accident, and that's how it ends. And then we go to The Fugitive, which it's kind of odd that it's called The Fugitive, when I would assume that that title is like alluding to Albertine, but she's dead now, so she's not exactly on the run anymore. But anyway, so we open with a sequence which is about 150 pages long, I think, in The Fugitive, which is nothing but reflection and introspection of the narrator. Like, literally no physical action at all. It's just the narrator reviewing his time with Albertine and his feelings and emotions, and gradually kind of overcoming the blow that her death dealt him, and realizing that life goes on and he'll fall in love with some other poor woman who he'll probably mistreat later. So then after that, the narrator and his mother go to Venice to see the sights. And then they come back, and then Gilbert Swan, who was the narrator's crush in the first book, ends up marrying Robert de Saint Loup, who is like the narrator's best friend. But then the narrator also learns that Saint Loup is actually gay, like his uncle Charlot, or at the very least bisexual, I guess, because he's getting down with dudes now too. And that's how that book ends. Not much at all in terms of plot, and that's really saying something because the previous books in this series were none too eventful in their own right. But like I said, this one takes it to a new level in terms of just not jack shit happening physically. Um, so yeah, that's the plots of the book. Pretty quick summary there. Okay, so let's talk about the technical aspects. So as I said, there is a noticeable difference between these books and the preceding ones because these were posthumous and they were not edited and revised to the extent that the previous ones were, obviously because Proust died. And there are some mistakes. To begin with, sometimes it feels like the scenes do not flow into each other like they should, like they do, like they did in the previous books seamlessly. There are occasional points with asterisks where it feels like there's a break in the scene, that it kind of jumps to something else. I think that's a mistake, but also characters die only to like reappear later. And there's also some information regarding certain characters that I believe is or will be contradicted. So yeah, there is a noticeable drop in like the polishing of these books. They're a little bit rougher. All the writing is still fabulous. I mean, this is Proust, and if this like it is truly something else. If this was an unrevised, unpolished manuscript that he didn't get to go back over at all, and it reads like this does, like then that means Proust is truly among the elite of writers in history because the writing in this is still just absolutely succulent. Don't really have much complaints as regards the writing, just um, there's some mistakes, and my lord, these books, these in particular, just nothing happens. It is whatever feeble motion was going on in the preceding books is just brought to a grinding halt in this, and it's just stagnant. Nothing's happening except a whole lot of navel gazing, although still beautifully written. But I guess I should really just expect that by this point. But yeah, so to rate The Captive and the Fugitive, unfortunately, I don't think this one's going to make it into the A range because all the preceding books of In Search of Lost Time that I've read and reviewed, I've given them at least like an A minus. Like it's been in the A range because even though they didn't exactly thrill me, even though I wasn't just compulsively turning the pages, um, the skill and craftsmanship was untouchable, but not so much in these, and that's through no fault of Proust. I mean, he died. I'm not going to hold that against him, but it doesn't change the fact that these books are noticeably rougher than the previous ones. So I think I'm going to have to give The Captive and the Fugitive um, a B plus. I think so, and also just as kind of an aside, I don't know if it's like an objective criticism, so I won't count it so much in my as against it objectively. But the sexual relations between the characters in these books, it's getting a little ridiculous. It's very strange because Proust himself, as we know, was gay, perhaps closetedly so, but we know he was gay. But the way that homosexuality is handled in these books, even more so than the previous one, is kind of odd because apparently in Proust's mind, at least with women, like with lesbians, like every woman is subconsciously like a lesbian because the narrator is just constantly convinced that Albertine is like running around behind his back, sleeping with other girls, and then like his suspicions are basically like confirmed, and like it feels like there aren't any women in these books that aren't lesbians, and like I just find that so unrealistic. It's like every girl that Albertine encounters, the narrator's like she's probably seducing her right now, and they're gonna get down later. And then like it feels like with certain revelations that he receives later on, it's like, oh, he was right. All the girls in these books are lesbians, and then of course Robert de Saint Loup, the best friend of the narrator. It's revealed in the end of the fugitive that he's gay, or again at least bisexual, and again that just comes completely out of left field, and it doesn't feel natural or realistic at all, because like it's weird because like one of the biggest mantras in the gay or LGBT whatever community is like born this way, right? But not so much, I don't guess, in Proust's mind, because characters switch sexualities just like that apparently. And it does not feel convincing whenever we learn that Son Lu is now knocking boots with guys. It's like, where did that come from? There was no indication that that was ever going to be a thing. So actually, I want to revise that. That might actually could be taken as an objective criticism against these books. So yeah, B plus for a couple of reasons with The Captive and the Fugitive. But as per usual with my review of these um, In Search of Lost Time books, I'd like to read a few select passages because, like I said, even though they're still a little rough, these are a little rough around the edges compared to the previous ones. The writing is still fabulous, and there are still some really good nuggets in there to be had. So, as always, let me consult my phone here where I wrote down some of the page numbers that I'd like to read. So, first we have over here on page 540, we have this section right here. It seems that events are larger than the moment in which they occur and cannot be entirely contained in it. Certainly they overflow into the future through the memory that we retain of them, but they demand a place also in the time that precedes them. One may say that we do not then see them as they are to be, but in memory are they not modified too? I think that kind of just ties in with like the overall theme of In Search of Lost Time. It's about time and memory, but then again, it's also kind of how we subjectively view things and how our life is such a subjective experience and stuff. It reads nicely, and it's kind of touches at the heart of key themes in this, I think. So then over here we have on page 628. Over here we have this section. Just as throughout the whole course of one's life, one's egoism sees before it all the time the objects that are of concern to the self, but never takes in the I itself, which is perpetually observing them, so the desire which directs our actions descends towards them, but does not reach back to itself, whether because being unduly utilitarian, it plunges into the action and disdains all knowledge of it, or because it looks to the future to compensate for the disappointments of the present, or because the inertia of the mind urges it to slide down the easy slope of imagination rather than to climb the steep slope of introspection. Uh, Good stuff there. People don't reflect enough, and also it kind of touches on, I think, obliquely at least, certain like philosophical issues about the self and how does the self exist except in relation to its surrounding environment. And people don't really take stock of themselves. They kind of just do things without adequately reflecting on it and stuff. Good stuff. I like the narrator's little insightful observations like that. And then over here on page 673, we have this section right here. For nothing ever repeats itself exactly, and the most analogous lives which, thanks to kinship of character and similarity of circumstances, we may select in order to represent them as symmetrical, remain in many respects opposed. By losing my life, I should not have lost very much. I should have lost only an empty form, the empty frame of a work of art. Indifferent as to what I might henceforth put into it, but happy and proud to think of what it had contained, I dwelt upon the memory of those hours of sweetness, and this moral support gave me a feeling of well-being which the approach of death itself would not have disturbed. I like the kind of likening of himself to a work of art, right? Because that's what these books are. It's about taking the experiences of one's life, no matter how mundane or, just blasé, and oh my goodness, there is so much mundanity in these books. These books are nothing but mundanity. It's about taking that and making art out of it, and that's kind of, I think, what the narrator was saying right there. He is kind of a frame, a picture frame for his own experiences. I really like that. Good stuff, good stuff. And then over here on page 751, we have this. I should also mention that this book is, I think, the longest of the lot because it's 2 in 1. So this one's a behemoth of a book. But over here on page 751, we have this little section right here, which reads, as there is a geometry in space, so there is a psychology in time, in which the calculations of a plane psychology would no longer be accurate because we should not be taking account of time and one of the forms that it assumes, forgetting. Forgetting, the force of which I was beginning to feel, and which is so powerful an instrument of adaptation to reality because it gradually destroys in us the surviving past, which is in perpetual contradiction with it. Time, he's kind of, likening, saying that time is a dimension, which it is, even though a lot of people don't think about it. We technically live in a world of 4 dimensions, even though a lot of people just think of it as a world of 3 dimensions. But anyway, so then we have over here on page 814, we have this section here, 814, right here. We would like the truth to be revealed to us by novel signs, not by a sentence similar to those which we have constantly repeated to ourselves. The habit of thinking prevents us at times from experiencing reality, immunizes us against it, makes it seem no more than another thought. There is no idea that does not carry in itself its possible refutation, no word that does not imply its opposite. True, Taiji makes that plain. Each thing contains its own opposite, its own antithesis. And the narrator kind of remarks upon that there, which I like. Good stuff. And then over here we have on page 890. This is a long-ass book, y'all. On page 890, we have this. How many letters are actually read into a word by a careless person who knows what to expect, who sets out with the idea that the message is from a certain person? How many words into the sentence? We guess as we read, we create. Everything starts from an initial error. Those that follow, and this applies not only to the reading of letters and telegrams, not only to all reading, extraordinary as they may appear to a person who has not begun at the same place, are all quite natural. A large part of what we believe to be true, and this applies even to our final conclusions with an obstinacy equaled only by our good faith, springs from an original mistake in our premises. I think that's true. A lot of us, start out from wrong assumptions, wrong premises, like the narrator says, and a lot of things in our life we kind of read into based on a flawed initial outlook. It's valuable little insights, tidbits like that keep me going through these books. But then over here on page 909, we have a section which I think is one of the most profound in the work, and which may kind of be the thesis statement of the entirety of In Search of Lost Time, or quite close to it at least. And it reads, everything that seems to us imperishable tends towards decay. A position in society, like anything else, is not created once and for all, but just as much as the power of an empire is continually rebuilding itself by a sort of perpetual process of creation, which explains the apparent anomalies in social or political history in the course of half a century. The creation of the world did not occur at the beginning of time. It occurs every day. Again, I think that is just possibly the most profound um, musing that I've read in this entire work so far is that the creation of the world did not occur at the beginning of time. It happens every day. And it does because time is a dimension. Each second is kind of a new reality that kind of springs from the old one. There's even, I think, in like Judaism, a concept called perpetual creation, where like the word creates reality each instant because it's infinite, it keeps going, right? But each instant that we experience is essentially a new creation out of the old, kind of something like that. You can probably look that up on your own, but I really like that because it's we have to remember that time is a dimension. Today is a truly a different world than the world of yesterday, simply because today is not yesterday. Really good stuff. That's one of the more kind of, I guess, philosophical observations that the narrator makes, but I love it. And yeah, it's that kind of stuff that keeps me going through this. So yeah, The Captive and the Fugitive, not quite up to par with the previous books in terms of the end product overall quality, but still a powerhouse work in its own right, even though it is um, trying at times to say the least because of just how boring it is. But it's still beautifully written. So yeah, overall B plus. Have you read The Captive and the Fugitive? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, whether you have agreed or disagreed with anything that I've said today. And if you haven't read The Captive and the Fugitive, well, you'd have to read the other books in Search of Lost Time to get here, so you'll know whether you're up to that challenge. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.